Hello, Mr. Robinson. Can I call you Andy?
Yeah, of course. Yes, please.
As you know, he is one of the very known journalists in the world of video games from VGC, which we have sourced in many of our articles. I want to ask you about what is it important about the gaming journalism as it has been in many years ago, as in the form of magazines or online websites, and not in the way that we are seeing in many podcasts and online YouTube channels. Of course, they have their place, they have their work to do, but why is it important to keep this kind of journalism in gaming alive?
Well, I think probably trust is the most important reason to keep it alive. Trust among readers, trust among the industry, to have people who are trained and understand how to, contextualize information for an audience properly, to scrutinize information. To answer your earlier question, it's about standards, it's about ethics, it's about training. It's obviously we live in an age and have done for some time now where everyone's a content creator. Anyone can, post content online. But being a journalist is a skill. It does require training. It does. I spent 10 years being shouted at in a newsroom, by people better than me and older than me. And then I'm shouting at people to raise their standards and to have pride in their work.
As one of the websites that have many exclusive reports, you've certainly have many sources in the industry, and therefore you are taking the information that is not already available to the public. What is this kind of relationship between the source and the journalist that makes this important, official, and not, a knife to the back to the industry?
I think that's an important point. I think the most important thing when you're dealing with information via anonymous sources is the story has to be important to our readers. I would say a news journalist, especially today in the internet age, is defined as much by what they don't report as what they do. For every story we post, via anonymous sources, there'll be 10, 20 more that we don't, because, to your point, does it really have much value to our readers if we say, oh, X game exists? Or, is it really, fair and contextualized to say, oh, there's some disagreement in a development team that might be comprised of, 1,000 people, that's going to have, people that are going to have very disparate opinions and takes on what's going on. So that's the gist of it, really. Coming back to your first question, you need to understand as well, through experience and through training, what is a valuable source and what isn't. You can be, you need to be able to contextualize information to be able to verify it. Somebody might pass you a piece of information that might not be the whole story. It might just be one person's take. It might be outdated, and you need to be able to understand that and to, kind of verify it.
I asked this question from Sean Layden yesterday, and I want to ask it from you. After being in this industry for a very long time, a lot of the things that shocks a lot of people are familiar to you. You know them, it looks like cliche. But there are things that excites you because you're doing this and therefore this industry matters to you. And there are things that keeps you up at night. What are those? Oh,
wow. What a question. We like it. We like, the industry to be healthy, of course. What keeps me up at night at the moment is obviously the concern about we're going for a big transition as an industry, clearly. I'm sure, as Sean Layden said to you, the way things have been done in the past in terms of game development is it doesn't really work anymore. From price points and boxes, and the cost of making big games now is really unsustainable. You only need to look at the profit margins of some of these companies. It's genuinely scary how much money they have to bring in to make a profit for their thousands and thousands of people. And of course, we've seen the kind of redundancies, which I think some people have been playing it down, but it has been more in the games industry by far than any other industry. So that concerns me, not just as someone who's covering the games industry, and obviously I care for its health, but also, even though we're in the media, that does affect us as well. There's been, redundancies and closures in the games media.
What happened with Game Informer?
Yes, of course. It's cyclical, really. I mean, we traditional sites like us make our money for advertising. Our audiences are generated ultimately by game releases and for their excitement around a game. So it's a kind of a harmonious circle, if you want. So that's the concern at the moment. I think if you speak to anyone in the games industry, especially off the record, they'll be telling you they're just trying to survive until next year and hope that GTA doesn't slip, and hope that Switch 2 is the disruptor that we hope it's going to be. And that probably answers the other question as well. That's what excites me. Seeing new ideas, really. I think I've been really, really lucky to the period that I've been covering games, like about 20 years, that covers some really disruptive, exciting launches. The Wii, the App Store, even Kinect and Oculus Rift and things like that. They were disruptive in their way. We don't see that as much anymore, I think, and I think that's a contributor for what's happening in the industry. I think it's again, this is something that Sean Layden would have said a lot, is that I don't think there's been enough effort to bring new players in to particularly the console space recently, or games in general. So I'm excited to see what Nintendo do, and I hope it's compelling rather than iterative, but I'm not convinced, to be honest.
In journalism of gaming and reviewing games and making content around it, there is a very important relationship between the publishers and the media. Which parts of this relationship do you feel has many problems and it should be fixed? Like how they can contribute to each other, to be helpful to each other and not an enemy. Like some of the very bad examples of this are a reporter says something in Twitter and the creator of the game gets so angry that they get into a fight. Like that's a very bad scene for the industry itself. How can this relationship become a more healthy and positive one?
I think, to your particular example, that's probably a developer who's kind of gone off piste. The relationship, obviously, when we're dealing with games publishers, we have a relationship with their PR departments. And that's something that is, well established and traditional in all forms of journalism. We have relationship with the PRs for these various companies. And in many cases, many cases, they're ex-journalists. They understand how we do our jobs and what we need to do our jobs.
Like Andy McNamara.
Yes, 100%. And that's always been very, very healthy. It's been very, very healthy. The only thing we ask of each other is transparency, because we're doing our jobs. They don't always align. They understand that we're here to service our readers and tell the truth. And in some cases be critical. And good PRs understand that and just give you what you need to do your job. The best job a PR can do for a journalist is to, succinctly explain why this product will be interesting to our audience. In terms of problematic use, there are some examples, and there always have been, of publishers who go the other way, and they want to be antagonistic with the press, which I don't think is useful. You've seen examples, lots of times in the past, of kind of review codes being revoked and stuff like that, and it's not helpful for anyone, I don't think. Kind of going to war with each other in that respect. It's to your point, or to my point, sorry. If they understand how we do our jobs, then everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, exactly. And as someone who I follow you for a long time, I know you know about the Japan scene of the video game industry, and therefore you're not limited.
As a tourist, yeah.
We all love Japan. But what can publishers do to make their presence in different parts of the world better? Because it's like, for a lot of countries, the amount of relationship that you can have with a company like Sony or Microsoft is limited compared to United States of America, UK, or Japan. This problem makes the diversity of media presence in a lot of events, in a lot of review gaming processes, and things like that very limited. It's like from this part of the world we have 5 media outlets, and from this country alone we have 14. How can this problem be solved?
I think you probably totally understand the issues there.
Yeah.
Coming from a market that's not the US like us.
Yes.
It's a leftover from the old days, the magazine days, where you'd have print deadlines and you're going to sell your magazine in certain markets. It's still very outdated. It's convenient for publishers, for obviously who've got European departments and Asia departments in terms of their marketing budgets and how they report and stuff like that. But it is a bit outdated. It does still go on to a certain extent. You know that it can be frustrating. Certainly, it's frequently frustrating for us that you are put into a pool, of course. There are many instances where I've spoken to, obviously, hopefully you'd know from VGC, we've got quite a broad reach. We're kind of frequently cited by the biggest publications. So we get read by the biggest audiences. The majority of our readers are in the US. The PRs and the publishers and the game developers themselves at the top level will read our site and in some cases want to invite us to stuff, but that's down to the territories. So there's plenty of examples where I've spoken to the US arms of big publishers, and they don't understand why we're not at a certain event or on a certain trip. But ultimately it's not their call, because if you're in Britain, for example, you'll fall into the UK or the European pool, and they've only got 3 slots. Or in the olden days at E3, because it was in the US, it was like, well, this is a US show, again, left over from the magazine days, so therefore we get the bulk of the appointments. It's certainly the case that if we were a US site, we'd have more access. But at the same time, that's not that's not necessarily hugely valuable for our readers, right? Because it's also the case that we have another degree of separation, which differentiates us. That doesn't, there's plenty of US outlets that I massively admire and we're friends of, who are, kind of do wonderful jobs. So this is absolutely not a criticism, but obviously you can see that it's a different flavour where in the UK, where perhaps we have a degree of separation, where there's an ocean between us and the developers we're covering, where sometimes we'll put the boot in a little bit more in general. But that's definitely something that I think about. Do I think it will change? It doesn't. I've seen no indication that it will, unfortunately. The job's all about relationships, particularly journalism. A lot of jobs are about relationships, but particularly in journalism, it is about relationships. And ultimately, their relationships are made with the people in front of you.
What do you think about the people who say journalism has become very biased because of the fact that for covering a lot of the events, you've been paid to, or at least, they pay for the hotel, pay for the flight tickets and all of that. What makes a report about a game demo a valuable piece of information when the person who's going to play that has been practically paid like thousands of dollars to go somewhere, have a great experience, 3 hours of playing, enjoying themselves?
Well, I'd say on one part that generally publishers are very, very aware of that. When I started 20 years ago, you're getting sent to Egypt for Tomb Raider, and bought a rug and, ultimate lavish experiences. That happened on magazines in the 90s, right? That doesn't happen anymore. There are trips, but from my experience of seeing the evolution, that's on the publisher side as well, as they're aware that that's not what we want when we're not comfortable, particularly impressed. Content creators, different. If you look at YouTubers and stuff like that, there's plenty of examples where we're working on exactly the same content and they'll get sent a massive box of goodies and free stuff, and we won't, because they know we don't, that's not kind of useful for our jobs, right? We're not comfortable to be, kind of taking that on. Because again, to the top of, our talk today, we have standards and ethics that a lot of content creators who are untrained do not. It's a different audience, it's a different type of content creation. I can only speak from my perspective, and I know, obviously I spend a lot of time with a lot of press, so I'd say probably this is the case with pretty much all of them. if somebody sends me somewhere to play a game, if one of our readers thinks that impresses me, it doesn't. In a lot of cases, I have to leave my family, and you have to go and stay in a hotel. And it's not like you're with your friends and you're having a party. You're in a hotel somewhere and you don't know anyone, and then you've got to play a video game for 3 hours, and then you've got a very, very tight deadline to do it, and you're jet lagged. It's not a party. It's not fun. There are trips that trips that I really, really enjoy. I went to Timasobi in Japan last month, and that was a trip I really, really enjoyed. I was really excited to go on, as I'm sure most people do, because they're a fascinating studio. They don't always have kind of open their doors to the public. They've got a really, really intriguing way of working, creation, and the game is amazing, right? Maybe it'd been different if it was a rubbish game, but certainly we would have said so. We would have said so. And to your point, there's no expectation. There's no expectation. I would not, spend more than a microsecond considering whether I should criticize a game on a trip that I've been sent on. I wouldn't do that. But perhaps they wouldn't send me on a trip on something they thought was going to get kind of criticized, right?
As the editor-in-chief of a website that gets cited for this as a source of the information many times, something to it.
Again, coming back to, journalism and kind of people having experience of doing this stuff, there is a way of properly citing someone. Yeah, I mean, everyone's style guide is usually different. I don't even know if style guides are a thing anymore for most people, but certainly, traditionally in journalism, you have a style guide. It's the Bible for this is how we do things. This is how we cite people. We have a style guide for how we source, and what we source. And typically, we would credit the publication as high as possible up the article, often in the second paragraph. And just make it very, very clear that the information is through them and we're citing them, right? Because it's in our favor as well, that degree of separation, that if we cite something that might not be quite right, which doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, then, obviously we'll make clear that that's not our information. The value of it is, speaking probably honestly as, kind of as a business owner, as well as the editor, is more on brand building, I guess. There's not a terrible amount of audience that comes over. That's part of the challenge of building a publication like we did in the last 5 years, is that the reality is that people have their publications, their content creators, and, they kind of go to them and they don't typically kind of go across. So there's not a huge amount of click-through from that happens. But what we did see over that 5 years is that if VGC, say, for example, you read IGN as your go-to source, if VGC keeps popping up on IGN every day, every week, I'm going to go and check these guys out. Do you know what? Like, these guys are getting their information from them all the time. I'm going to go, and that's what we saw, is our audience would build organically that way. And not just through the, kind of readership themselves, but also other journalists or other press. We're very, very fortunate that, other kind of journalists and content creators have been super, super supportive of us. And that's been a big part of, kind of our growth, really.
Last but certainly not least, I know VGC is publishing a book.
Yes.
Why do you feel that was necessary for you to become your next move?
I mean, it's obviously it's a side thing. It's a novelty for us. It's an offer that just came up that we thought we could do without kind of disrupting our day-to-day too much. Our background is in print. I started in print. Chris, who's editing it, Chris Scullion, used to work on Official Nintendo magazine in the UK for years. He publishes books regularly. He's encyclopedias. So it's very natural thing that came up, right? I mean, it's quite exciting to have, in a world where our content's so disposable on the internet, like something physical again, like a compendium of like our reviews and stuff from the year. So yeah, it's just an exciting opportunity that we couldn't pass on. We got some really, really cool art from Will Overton, who's a famous kind of magazine artist in the UK who worked on like all the old school magazines. So it's really, really beautiful. And yeah, it's coming out in February. I think you can pre-order it now on all good retailers.
Okay, thank you very much. It was
so
a
much.
very informative
Cheers.
talk to me, and I'm happy to talk to you because you are one of the people in this industry that I follow very closely, and I respect you so
I'm
much.
happy to hear that. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. I enjoyed it.
Same.